Thank you for joining me for this lesson. I have a lot of information packed in today about, choosing a photo reference that is a great composition. What makes it a great composition opposed to a boring composition? And how do you make it come alive with paint? I'm going to be going over that and much, much more. Come on and meet me in the studio. This is right outside Zion National Park in 2017. I was there with my family. Do not go Memorial Day weekend. We actually had to leave and come back to the park during the week when it was less busy. I took over 1,000 photos during this trip, and some of them are really boring, like this. They had interesting pieces about them, but either the lighting was bad or there was no focal point. Great to remember, but they don't make good paintings. On the other hand, this is very interesting. I've already done that painting. This is spectacular. I've yet to do that painting. This is interesting if you like cows. It's got a great composition and a cute cow. This is spectacular. Well-balanced composition. This, I've actually done this painting many years ago. And this is the painting I chose to do today, which I think is really interesting. But now right here, look how boring it is without good lighting. Without the sun coming into that canyon, that's boring. And look at the difference, how it just comes alive with that sunlight coming down into the canyon. It is so important to have good lighting in your painting. This really illustrates that. Let's get started. As usual, I have a burnt sienna acrylic glaze on my canvas. I'm using a photograph that is more narrow than my canvas is, so I'm going to stretch that scene off to the left and make my focal point a little bit more off to the right. And I'm just doing a quick sketch with charcoal, and I will make changes because my sketch is off. I got a little confused by the lines. You'll see where I changed that sketch later. That line on top of the boulder is actually the line above it. Anyway, above the trees. You'll see, I'll make that correction later. Now I'm putting in sky. I'm not covering up every bit of that background, and I'm putting in more interesting clouds. Clouds are there, but I don't like them. That one little cloud's too little, and so I make it a little bit larger. Artistic license. Okay, so now I'm laying in some of the colors way off in the distance. Remember that the further away something is, the closer those tones will be together. You will not have as much contrast in the distance. So even dark shadows are going to be much lighter, more filled with, purples and blues. Tone it down for that background. And sometimes I push that even further than the photograph shows, just to emphasize that it's off in the distance. There's my little bitty dabs for the trees. And this photograph was taken with a wide angle lens. Zion National Park, the Narrows is just a fabulous place. These canyon walls are between 1,000 and 2,000 feet high, and the wide angle lens made it look not as high as it actually is, but I liked the fact that I had some sky in there and some of that area further away that I just thought it made a better composition to have some of that in the background. So I'm coming forward a little bit, and my colors are getting darker. I'm paying a lot of attention to the colors in the rocks, and man, are there a lot of colors in the rocks out there. It is very interesting to paint. Every color you can imagine is in those rocks. Now with the foliage that's further in the background, I'm making sure again that those tones are closer together, that the highlights are a bit more dull than in the foreground. I'm reserving those brightest colors for the foreground, and that's going to give that depth. Okay, you'll see where I'm building. I want to create the texture in those rocks. I'm letting a lot of that background color show through, and I will make adjustments as I go. And even though normally you go from the background to foreground, I just get excited and jump all around sometimes. I wanted to play with the water in the foreground. I happened to be using those colors in that foliage in the background and thought, I'll just go ahead and bring it down here in the water, because I noticed that the color was the same. So now I'm playing with the water down there. Sometimes I get excited and I just can't go in sequence. And right now, when you're laying in the initial colors, you're going to go back and layer and adjust things anyway. If you're getting some enjoyment from this lesson, please press the thumbs up button below. Like right there, I'm just jumping around. I can't tell you why. Just felt I wanted to. But obviously I am going to have to do, the rocks with the foliage on top. There are some things that you do have to do in sequence. The people at the very end, I will have to do at the appropriate time after I have the background painted in. Now this painting is really complex. There's a lot going on, but I think that's something that makes it very interesting and adds to the excitement of the area. A lot of times with my national park paintings, I have no people in them. In this one, it was very important to put people in it to show you the scale of these huge boulders and huge cliffs. If I did not have people in there and you've never been to this area before, you'd have no idea how big these things are. So those rocks in the background, I am not trying to make things perfectly matching the photograph. Don't get so caught up in mimicking a photograph that it takes the fun out of it. I'm just skipping around. I'm trying to give an indication of the rocks without getting really caught up in detail. I'm paying attention to the underlying color and then I'm coming in, layering in colors over that, and just kind of doing a general indication of the rocks. You'll see, I'll come back over it, I'll get a little more detailed, but I'm not going to totally stress over that. When you see the final painting, it is still quite painterly, not overly detailed on those rocks. It's all about building up the layers. See how I've done that green reflection right under my arm? That is reflective light, and it makes that area glow, which is something that's so fabulous about Zion and the national parks out west. You have all these big orange rocks that cast a lot of reflective light and make things very interesting. So you've got oranges and greens from the foliage, that's being reflected. And there's just a lot going on. So you'll see now I'm looking at that moss on the rock and trying to lay in some color indicating that. There's that big boulder. Originally, I painted the shadow on that boulder too dark because I was going by my photograph. And my photograph is really a little too dark right there. The following day came back and lightened that up and added more interest to that. Building up the layers on this. You'll see I'll tone that down. One of the issues with that corner is I'm laying on wet oil paint. It reflects a lot of light, and I've got a light over my left shoulder, and it's not that light. You'll see I'll change the light to a different location later. So here I'm trying to give an undercoating of all that reflective light coming off the water. A lot of green and yellow in there, a lot of color bouncing around. I love those stripes. That reminds me of a huge cupcake or a muffin or something. I just love those stripes. I was going to call it Zebra Rock, but there's another area in the park called Zebra something, and so I didn't want to make it confusing. That is a rock way off in the distance, and I really want that whole area to be the focal point. I want you to be led through the narrows like we were. It's so exciting there. You just want to keep going and going and going and see what's around the next corner. And so everything I'm doing in this painting is to lead the viewer forward. And there's arrows all through it that are naturally there. But I loved the composition in that all these things lead you into the focal point, and then the focal points lead you forward and make you want to go into the painting. Tweaking the rock, tweak, tweak, tweak. You'll see I am constantly doing that, and yes, I am skipping around a lot. But sometimes I don't know if I get bored with an area. It's not really that. I just get excited to go to the next area. I just see so much that I want to work on at one time that, I kind of just skip around. But I'm somebody that, there's not a lot of hard and fast rules. Painting should be just a joyful experience. So don't get so bogged down by rules that you're not having fun. It's funny what people see in paintings. After I posted this on Facebook just yesterday, I had people go, "Oh, I see this and I see that," all these different animals and things in the rocks. I find that very interesting. When people see a lot more in your painting than you even initially intended on being there. But I love that give and take, that participation in the painting. I've also asked them to help me name the painting. Please give me a thumbs up below if you're learning something today. Those striations of the dark minerals coming down the rocks, I find just very interesting, and I love to do the horizontal strata of the rock. Out there you have white and pink and peach, orange, burnt sienna, and just gray. You have all these different horizontal things going on, and then you have these vertical colors coming down over it. So it's important to kind of build your horizontals first, just like it's been done in nature. You're putting down the horizontal strata that's on the rocks, and then you're putting in your coating that is on the surface of the rock next. Oh, there I've changed my lighting. So now I have lighting from above. The thing is, though, now it kind of washed out the entire painting because the entire painting is wet and it's reflecting some of the oil paint. And you'll see at the end. I'll photograph it, and you'll see that the contrast will come back. But you can still see, fundamentally what I'm doing here as I'm laying in more and more detail on those rocks. Now, I could have just left those rocks very painterly, not tried to show you some of those horizontal grooves in the rocks, but I was having fun with it. I like a certain amount of detail, and I find all of those things very interesting when I'm there to look at all those different textures. And so I'm trying to show you what I find so beautiful about this area, what I find so interesting. After all, that's what fine art is. It's the expression of the artist. We should be communicating what we find very interesting, and that can be very individual. And then you hope to find people out there who appreciate it the way that you do. You'll find that when you're doing reflective color, there is no white. You're not going to use white in your reflective color, even though it looks like it's lighter, but it's going to be pure color. You can use yellow, but don't use white. You can use orange, you can use that sap green, the yellow green, but no white. Now, if it's light from the sky, that's when you start using white to lighten your colors. And that's the difference. Reflective light is very intense compared to the light from above is going to be more muted, a bit more washed out. Kind of like my lighting in the studio. Someday I'm gonna have the perfect setup. Don't know when that's gonna happen. If there's anybody out there that's found the perfect setup, let me know. It's kind of an issue because when I'm painting, I have to angle the light where I can see what I'm doing. So sometimes for you to be able to see it beautifully, then I can't see it because I'm working from a different angle, and it can be highly reflective. So that's what I was going through. I was moving it around, and there were things I was doing that was making it look beautiful to the viewer, but I couldn't see the painting. Way too much reflection on it. So this was the happiest medium that I got to. So just keep in mind that is darker than what you're seeing, higher contrast in those darks. I can't emphasize enough how important good lighting is on your subject. I'm not talking about studio lighting. Yes, that's important. But when you're taking the photograph, make sure that you have an interesting balance of light and color. We are type A vacationers. We cram a lot in. I'm hoping that that's going to change when we go on the road, for a couple of years. We won't be in such a big hurry. And sometimes you're just not at a gorgeous location when the lighting's good. But man, can it make just a tremendous difference in the composition and the liveliness of the painting. So it's the next day, I'm starting to lay in that foliage, and I had to let that orange dry just enough where my paint would stick. I'm reserving my brightest yellow green and yellows for that foreground, and some light from above. So the light from above has a little bit of the white added to it, and a little bit of the blue from the sky, so it's more toned down. But then under that, we also have that very bright, this was early spring there, so we have that really bright leafy color of sap, well, not the sap green, that's the darker one, but that yellow green really makes that lively. Now in this painting, this time I did not bring out cerulean blue. A lot of times I'll use cerulean blue in the reflected light. Cerulean blue is a warm blue. Instead, I'm using ultramarine blue and violet, a lot in the shadows. You also need to consider balancing your greens with some red tones. Now, of course, all under this is orangey red tones and burnt sienna, so that helps balance the greens. But even in your cool shadowed areas, balance your greens with a little bit of warm. Okay, so I'm getting into the itty bitty little people that are back. That guy is sitting on a rock way back there. So they're in bright sunlight, so they're washed out. And I'm just laying in little dabs of the darker paint first to establish where the bodies are. I'm not trying to do, perfect shapes or anything. Those bodies are so far away. I'm just trying to give a little indication of that. And then you'll see I'll come back with highlights later. Now I'm starting to set up the scene for the person. Yeah, they're that person going around the rock. Okay. Now you'll see in this photograph, off to the left, that person is, wading down into the water, going around that huge boulder. Now, I was too much of a wimp. I actually climbed over the boulders on the left side to go further instead of wading down into the cold water, which is really funny because later on in the trip, as we were getting really close to the end, I did a face plant and got pretty soaked. But I made it through most of it without getting soaked. I had cameras and stuff. I was trying not to get really wet. So a trick here that if you'll notice from the photograph in the beginning, when I was giving you the comparison of the photo without good lighting and the photo with good lighting, I have combined two photos, and the person I'm painting right there that's looking toward us, toward the viewer, is actually the same person that's going around the boulder. These are two different photographs that I've combined, and you'll see her husband or partner is beside her. And what I liked and why I did this was I liked how they are leading you through the painting. You've got the perspective of them, and you've got, I'm telling the story of what you do here in the Narrows. You wade through the water and you go around these boulders and make your way up the canyon. And, it's really quite an adventure. And so that's what I'm trying to point out. I didn't think that the one figure or, the two figures told the story as well as all three figures. I really appreciate you joining me today and staying through the end. Go through those vacation photos, or maybe you live in a beautiful area, and paint things that are really important to you, things that you love. Please subscribe to this channel and press the bell notification if you would like to be notified every time I upload a new video. Also, something that I always do is I put the painting away and I look at it the following day and tend to make other little tweaks and adjustments. This painting was the same.